Welcome back to the CSP Elite Baseball Development Podcast. I'm your host, Eric Cressey, and this is episode 137. We've got an absolutely awesome dude from today's game. Actually plays all over the field. Is kind of a super utility player. Guy I've gotten to know over the last 3 off seasons, training at our facility in the off season. He's got some really cool stories as a guy who kind of exceeded expectations as an undrafted player and has really, thrived on the major league scene and has a lot of good lessons to share with the players and the coaches and the parents that are listening to this. So we are in for a good one. This episode is brought to you by Athletic Greens, the most comprehensive NSF certified for sport daily nutritional supplement I've ever tried. With so many stressors in life, it's difficult to maintain effective nutritional habits and give our bodies the nutrients they need to thrive. As a father of 3 young kids and a co-founder of multiple businesses in multiple states, on top of still being an avid exerciser, I know that busy schedules can really take their toll on us. Whether it's poor sleep, exercise or life stressors, environmental factors, or simply not eating enough of the right foods, we can wind up deficient nutritionally. This is where Athletic Greens can really help. It's a game-changing nutritional insurance policy. They simplify the logistics of getting optimal nutrition on a daily basis by giving you just one thing with all the best things. And that's why I use it daily and recommend it to our athletes. 1 scoop of Athletic Greens contains 75 vitamins, minerals, and whole food sourced ingredients, including a multivitamin, multimineral, probiotic, green superfood blend, and more. They work together to fill the nutritional gaps in your diet, increase energy and focus, aid in digestion, recovery, and supporting of a healthy immune system. This all can happen without taking multiple products. While most nutritional products come to market and stay stagnant, Athletic Greens continues to obsessively improve this one holistic formula based on the latest research, producing 53 improvements over the last decade. They invest in the most absorbable and natural source of each ingredient and go above and beyond in third-party testing to ensure their customers continue to receive the highest quality and best daily nutritional habit on the planet. It's lifestyle friendly, whether you're keto, paleo, vegan, dairy-free, or gluten-free, and contains less than 1 gram of sugar without compromising on taste. They put 75 ingredients to the NSF for Sport certification to come up with a formula that's trusted by some of the world's best athletes, including our own. Right now, Athletic Greens is giving our listeners 10 free travel packets with their subscription. Simply go to athleticgreens.com/Cressey to receive my offer. These travel packs are perfect for supporting your immune system, energy, and gut health when you're traveling for games, training, or simply when you're on the go. They can be a great counterbalance to less than ideal on-the-road food options. So if you want to bridge the gap between deficient and optimal and give yourself the best chance to get nutrient diversity, then head to athleticgreens.com/Cressey and get your 10 free travel packets today. Again, that's athleticgreens.com/Cressey, Cressey. Today's guest is a utility player who grew up in Indiana and attended Oakland University in Michigan from 2013 to 2016. He was a 2-time All-Horizon first-team selection and became just the 5th player in school history to amass over 200 hits and tallied a program record 514 assists. He ranks top 10 in school history in games played, at-bats, runs scored, doubles, home runs, and total bases. He was inducted into their Hall of Honor in 2022. After going undrafted, he was signed as a free agent by the Tampa Bay Rays after the 2016 draft. He progressed steadily through the minor leagues and began the season in AAA in 2019. After starting the season with the International League leading 57 RBIs through June 20th, he was called to the big leagues for his MLB debut with the Rays on June 23rd. He was with the Rays for the 21 season, and in the 21-22 offseason, he was traded to the Brewers. At the time of this recording, over 201 Major League Baseball games, he's batting .251 with 21 home runs and 65 RBIs. Along the way, he's played 8 positions on the field and served as a designated hitter. Please welcome to the show, Mike Brosseau. Mike, my man, thank you for joining the show.
Absolutely, Eric. Thanks for having me on, my man.
This is long overdue. We've had a lot of good conversations. A lot of people that say we look exactly alike when we have conversations in person too. So I appreciate you rocking a hat for this while I'm involved, so they can differentiate who's who. But we're going to talk about you to start off, and your story is awesome. But I think you have to hit it from the beginning and just see how much work you put in to get there. And I've been fortunate to see it in person some too. So let's talk about you as a high school athlete. I know we've had some Indiana guys on the podcast before. Josh Lindblom was on, Nick Wickram was on, a couple Purdue guys, and they always seem to have 2 things in common. They were all multi-sport athletes, and they always had to grind to get baseball in when there was cold weather, when there was snow. Was that kind of you as well?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's pretty spot on for an Indiana high school kid playing baseball. It's tough. You basically know every indoor cage in the region by the time the winter's done. But yeah, I grew up playing soccer, basketball, staying active during the off season and baseball time, baseball was always number one. It was always passed on from my dad. That's the sport that I remember at the youngest age, playing in the backyard with my family. So that was always number one. But you're right. I mean, basketball was, a very close second. Honestly, I loved basketball growing up. Soccer was more of, I think, something to kind of get some body awareness at a young age, some footwork, stuff like that. But yeah, throughout high school, throughout growing up, middle school, younger days, it was mostly basketball, baseball. And then once high school hit, I played freshman year basketball. Realized that my body type wasn't taking me very far in the game. I kind of got passed up super quick in basketball. And then focused sophomore year on pretty much only baseball. Like I said earlier, was a lot of indoor cages, a lot of indoor facilities. And yeah, just trying to find any way to possibly be ready for that spring season right around the corner.
It's interesting when you think about like both soccer and basketball, you have like dexterity, one of like the lower extremity and one of the hands. Like, right. Do you think that when you look back on it, like that's something that made you, more versatile as a defender like you are today? I was going to talk later about it, but.
Yeah, I think so. I think it was something where I kind of was able to grow into my body. I never had like one of those crazy growth spurts as a young age. So I was never like that, like, Bambi, like not knowing how my body works. I was, pretty fundamentally sound throughout pretty much my whole early life. But I definitely think those two things complemented that. And I think the, agility of soccer and basketball kind of complemented, the fundamentals of baseball growing up.
Yeah. As a position player in the North, one of the things that we often hear is like that you can't evaluate good players, right? They don't see good pitching often enough. Obviously, you've been down in Florida, like you have high school kids that go out and see 92 to 95 in the high school ranks, like multiple times per season. And then there's like the area code circuit and, all the travel events and things like that. Were you a guy that didn't have a chance to see those? Did you actually, I want to say I saw somewhere that you were like a high school teammate of Sean Manea as well, right?
Yeah, definitely. Those kind of guys were sprinkled around the area, but definitely not something you saw on a consistent basis. I remember, a couple of guys, definitely Sean was in that realm, but maybe a handful of guys that I can remember, probably not even that. I would say 3 or 4 guys that I saw that was 90 plus velo. And like you said, down in Florida nowadays, they're seeing that on a consistent basis, and warmer weather kind of helps that a little bit. But yeah, it was a tough area, I guess, to kind of get evaluated properly. I'd never thought that I was under talented or people were passing me by in baseball. It was just I never got those looks to those big time schools, which was understandable. Very short window of time for scouts to see Northern players play, and the competition wasn't bringing more scouts in. They weren't looking at these 5-star guys and see, oh, Mike made a good play on defense, we can start looking at him. It was just never one of those things. So yeah, I think that kind of paved the rest of the way where I ended up at a smaller program school, and I think that definitely had some reason of why that happened for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting. We had Kevin Youkilis on, and you kind of had a little bit of a similar path where I think he had one Division I offer at Cincinnati. It obviously worked out really well. And I remember the coach, there was a quote, something to the effect of, he's like, I don't think we saw something that nobody else saw. He was just a lot better than we realized when he actually got to campus. Was to be honest, like looking at your numbers, like they're outstanding over your course of time when you went to Oakland University, like but they weren't like oh my gosh, we missed this first rounder and he just happened to like stumble into our lap. You know what I mean? Like you got steadily better over the course of time. So like, I guess when you look back on it, it sounds like you just described how you wound up at Oakland, but do you think it was a blessing in disguise to play at a smaller program where you got all those reps as you started to face more talent?
Yeah, I really do. I think if I kind of got funneled into a bigger program, looking at where I was in that point in my life, I think I would have been kind of faded out into the, into the bigger pool of players where I might not have been focused in on as much as I was at Oakland University, where I was kind of, immediate impact player. So yeah, I think there was a lot of I'm sorry, there wasn't a lot of offers. By the like, I had one. I had Oakland University, and I think I had like a Michigan State preferred walk on, which was probably like we were talking about earlier, the bigger pool and bigger school. That wouldn't have worked out. Looking back on it and kind of having that hindsight 2020 vision, very grateful that chose the Oakland University route. I think I was more centralized into focusing only on baseball and not like trying to make a team. And it was one of those things where I made the team and then I was able to kind of hone in on my skills. And another good thing was, I mean, we kind of got our butt kicked a lot in college. It was one of those things where it was, our program wasn't where it needed to be, when I was there, and we were playing some really good competition. We would always open up with, those SEC, ACC, West school teams, just because our school was up in, Northern Michigan where we couldn't play for April and May at home. So you got to really see, some big kids really quick and, the talent level and, quickly realized you needed to change something, whether it was, getting bigger, faster, stronger, playing better in order to compete at the next level, which was always the goal for me.
I think kids overlook just how important at-bats are. Like you hinted at it earlier, it's a shorter season. There's just not as many to get. And you go to a school where you can play right away. I mean, I'm looking at, you got 151 at-bats as a freshman, started 41 of the 47 games you played in. Like, it's at least a way to test the waters. Like, hey, is this right for me? And you got progressively better each year, which I think is a really, really overlooked thing. And honestly, it's something we see a lot more. I don't think people realize how many like smaller school guys there are in the big leagues. I think if you walk through the typical clubhouse, you'd see a lot more guys from the other instead of just ACC and SEC caliber programs.
Yeah, definitely.
You mentioned like strength and conditioning. Like, when did you kind of catch that bug and start hitting it? Like, had you done it in high school a little bit, or was it something that you really had to jump in on at Oakland?
Yeah, a little bit of high school. I'd say when I was starting to kind of get looks in high school, so junior, senior year, that's where the progression really started into like realizing that you needed to do this in baseball instead of just, going out and playing every weekend. But definitely kind of what I touched on earlier was my freshman year when we opened up against, I think we opened up against Maryland, which isn't the biggest baseball school, but it's still, Big Ten at the time, coming from a Horizon League school is, a different caliber of talent. And then I remember, Florida State, Oklahoma State, USC, like all these big time schools where like those first 4 weeks in my freshman year was like, I think a pivotal point in my baseball career. It was one weekend after another of just seeing really, really, really good players that I've never seen before coming from Northwest Indiana. And now you're starting to see it on a countrywide basis. And it just, as bad as it is to say, they were just so much better than me at that point in my career, where I realized like, if I really wanted to get into baseball and take this as a career, I needed to change something.
Yeah. That's a good lesson though. I mean, so many people avoid failure at all costs, and parents like pave the way for their kids. Like, you not embraced it.
Definitely. Yeah. So, finish out that freshman season. And I think to answer your question, that freshman summer was where I really honed in on, I think I gained in like 25, 30 pounds that off season and absolutely just, it was a step away from the sport, I think, as far as on field, practicing and that was the time where I really focused in on, body awareness and getting bigger and stronger and doing things the right way that way.
And it showed. I mean, 0 homers as a freshman, 2 as a sophomore, 7 as a junior, 10 as a senior. So it plays.
Right.
But what's interesting is it sounds like there was unrecognized talent, and that's how you wound up at maybe a smaller program. I'm actually really fascinated by like the transition from a college ball to pro ball, because the numbers were outstanding. And as you just outlined, you were facing some good competition. You started 50 games your last year in college. You hit 10 homers. You had a 456 on base percentage. You stole like 8 out of 9 bags. I'm sure you played all over the field, all these different things, and you weren't drafted. And this was like in an era when it was a 40-round draft. There was 1,200 plus guys that were drafted ahead of you. But you'd actually be hard pressed to find a player who performed as well offensively as you did in probably the 3 years that followed. So I'm curious, like, what do you think allowed you to thrive once you got to pro ball? Were you underappreciated, because it was a small school and you weren't scouted as heavily? or, was it, just a situation that you got way more resources in pro ball that you hadn't previously had at a smaller school, and you thrived with them?
Yeah, I think definitely a combination of both of them, but more so, I more so the first one. I think I was underappreciated. And that's weird for me to say because I've always been like, super humble guy, right? Like never look at me, right? Like
I think you can say it because you're in the big leagues and you signed for $1,000. Like, yeah. I think we can be honest about that.
But
here's a plane ticket. Go play.
Yeah. It was basically $1,000 and a plane ticket and a baseball hat. So I do think I was underappreciated. I think I did enough on the field in college to kind of get some looks in pro ball. And the biggest thing with the draft is I knew I never was going to be a top 10 guy. Like you kind of see the writing on the wall, 5'10", mid-major school. We weren't very good. I did put up numbers, but the competition level wasn't where I needed to be to get those, top 10 round looks. But it was something where I always worked to get drafted, and just hearing your name was something that I was really, really striving for. And that really kind of hurt. That stung when I didn't get a chance to hear that. But I think it was, like I mentioned earlier, it was never like I never felt overmatched besides that freshman year. But like throughout the rest of college, I was always, walking away from the game like, oh, I had a good game. This pitcher was good, but, I performed well. We might not have won, we might not have played well, but it was never a feeling of, I got no chance in this at bat. And I think that was kind of just more internal. I never think it showed, externally. Like scouts never showed up to the games early to watch BP. You saw them sprinkled in the stands every now and again, but it was probably to see somebody else and kind of just have me in the background. But yeah, I think there was a period where I was performing well, but just, whether it was a combination of the bad weather, bad team, unfortunately, there was just no reason to have, make a scout make a trip to see a 30th round, draft pick that's going to sign for $5,000-$10,000. And that's just the way it ended up. The third day, Pet went and passed, and got a free agent call like the next day, I think. So it all worked out in the end. And then obviously when you get into pro ball, like you mentioned, there are those resources, those better scouting reports. You can kind of dial in on video. And I've always been the kind of guy that uses those resources, I think, very well, in a way that I think works for me. And once those resources were kind of opened up to me, I think that kind of steamrolled into having some pretty immediate success in early years of pro ball.
I'm actually fascinated kind of what you implied, like in a way that works well for you. Like, do you find that some guys just get way too caught up in video and it dumbs them up? Like, what you clearly found what works best for you. What is it?
Yeah, I do. I think at this point in your career, your swing is your swing. Obviously, your adjustments are a day-to-day, challenge and battle. That's why hitting, I think, is the hardest thing to do in sports. But 95% of the time, your swing is your swing. So now, what do you hone in on? Do you hone in on release point? Pitcher's tendencies. What's his out pitch? What's his, get ahead pitch? It's more so of doing your homework on the pitcher and less on, what you think you need to do to get ready for the game. Because I think what I struggled early on, first couple of years in pro ball, low A, high A, was I would get caught in the system of doing the same thing every day, where I had to hit BP on the field. I had to take 5 rounds in the cage. I had to do this way, where, the days on they change day-to-day basis, right? So I might not feel the same this day, but tomorrow, it's something changes a little bit where I don't necessarily have to have the same routine. As long as I feel prepared and ready for the game with my body, then I can kind of focus in on how I'm going to get attacked. And I think that was kind of the change in mindset of realizing I'm good to go here. I don't need to get these 5-6 rounds in the cage to feel prepared in the box. It's more so, knowing when I feel ready, knowing that feeling of where I need to be in my swing. And now I take all the focus externally into how I'm going to get attacked that day.
That's a really good point. And I think that's where the game has changed. Like in the, if we're talking 15 years ago, it's like, I'm going to go face a bunch of right-handed sliders today because that's
Yeah,
what I struggle with. But if you're facing a lefty that doesn't throw a slider, it's kind of a silly like preparation.
right.
The more resources that are available, the more specific you can actually get in your prep. The big leagues is obviously a lot of much harder transition than going high school to college, college to pro ball. What were some of the biggest adjustments for you when you were first called up? It sounds like, I don't want to put words in your mouth. That was the hardest transition, is AAA to the big leagues.
Yeah, definitely. I think I would go on a limb and say that's the biggest adjustment for many players, right? But so yeah, I think so. I actually had really good success, I think, early on in 19 and 20 when the first couple of years I got called up. And to this day, as weird as it is to say, I really don't know how. I think I never had an approach in the box, right? I never had, what's the word? It was always a feel thing. Like I never grew up with, my approach growing up was live right center, because that's everything that's a right-handed young player is taught, right? Like stay on the inside of the ball, shoot the right center gap, don't cast, the basic stuff. But I never really truly knew what that meant until I struggled in 2021 for really the first time in my career. Like I said, 19, I kind of got called up midway through the season, so nobody really knew how to attack me, I think, and I kind of just rolled with it. 2020 was obviously COVID season. Everything was kind of messed up and in the air already. So I had a really good COVID season, but I don't know if it truly, gave credit to, it's a 60-game season, right? 2021, once things kind of fell back into normal life, and I had, 162-game season, and pitchers had time to prepare and do the scouting report and really exposed my weak spots. And that was the first time in my career where I started to struggle and not knowing why I was struggling, and really not having a home base to come back to because I never had any kind of plan or approach before that. So that whole year was it was a weird year where it was, I never felt bad coming to the field, but I would always walk away with really bad results and not knowing why it happened. So that offseason, I really had to dig deep and find a hitting coach who worked well with me and what I thought worked well in the box. And I luckily did. I ran into a hitting guy by the name of Benny Craig. He introduced by Matt Duffy. Just one random day in the off season, he called me. He was like, "Hey, I'm in Indiana. You want to come down here?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'll be there in 2 hours," because it was down in Indianapolis. But long story short, linked up with Benny Craig, feel good hitting, and we just sat down for literally the first 3 weeks. It was just getting to know each other, doing our homework. What do I need to do to be successful in the box? And like I said, that home base thing where you start to feel off track a little bit in the box. Everybody does at some point. What do I need to do to kind of get back to what I do well? And that was something that I was truly missing. And talk about, what you were asking about earlier, the adjustments I needed to make was really, knowing myself as a player and having that almost Bible of, 10 things that I need to do to kind of, but that works for me. And I never had that before, recently, this last couple off seasons.
Yeah. Actually, I'm really interested to hear maybe a follow-up question that is like, you're obviously here like for pandemic baseball in 2020 and 2021 you were here for like lockout. You got around a lot of these guys, and so you had a chance to like rub elbows in the cage with Goldie. You guys have been real good buddies, and the Trey Turners and the Josh Bells and Brandon Nimmo's, like a lot of these guys that were around, Nolan Arenado. Like when those guys are in, you obviously have refined your approach. Like, do you have to be careful not trying to be them, try to like take in what they can teach you? I mean, you're obviously playing with like a Christian Yelich now, like a lot of really good players over the course of time. Like, is it hard to pull in information from really advanced hitters who have had a lot of success without like almost changing who you are? Or do you have a pretty good filter?
Yeah, no. I think that's a really good point, actually. There's so much talent out there, and everybody plays this game differently. All walks of life, different parts of the country, different parts of the world. So it's really cool and interesting for me, I think, to see how everybody goes about their business. They're kind of doing, there's, those guys that you mentioned, I know for a fact that most of them are trying to do the same thing, but they all do it a little bit differently. what works for them. So yeah, I think you have to have that good funnel of, like you mentioned, where you see what this guy's trying to do and you talk to them and hear their approach, but you want to incorporate that in your game, but without taking away from your game, if that makes sense. I think it's a really good point. Because I'm a kind of a baseball nerd. I watch a lot of videos, watch a lot of swings. And I think that's kind of what's helped me out throughout the years, not having that approach, not having that coach, throughout my whole life kind of work with me. I had to kind of pick and choose and, watch different players and bring that into my game without, going over, trying to be the next Justin Turner, trying to be the next Trey Turner. Because that's not going to work. You got to be the first, Mike Brosseau before you can do that stuff.
That's a great idea. So something that always stands out about me is you have the awareness of doing whatever it takes to help teams win, right? You play defense in multiple positions, you run the bases well, like you'll take a hit by pitch, you'll pinch hit against the lefty. Heck, I think you've got like 4 scoreless innings on the mound this year. I actually went and looked at it. It comes up as 2-seam splitter. I don't know if that's actually the pitch mix or what it is, but was that awareness of like, whatever it takes to help, like something that was actually taught to you by the coaches under whom you played? Was it something that you kind of, you had to figure out on your own as a way to stay in the big leagues, prolong your career? Like, is there an actual awareness then, or is it just who you are?
I think a little bit of just who I am, also an awareness of this is what I needed to do at the young stages in professional baseball to keep a job, honestly. Like we talked about earlier, I was that undrafted, free agent guy who didn't have much weight on their shoulder. So kind of going into it, I mean, I was basically told when I did sign that I was a roster filler position, which is not the greatest thing that somebody wants to hear going into pro ball, but it also made things pretty clear for me right from the get-go was, hey, there's an opportunity here, a very small window. You do what you want with it. At that point, I was pretty much realizing that that's a once in a lifetime opportunity. Might as well, go full throttle for as long as I can ride the wave for. So that first year in pro ball, the rookie year or GCL rookie league as a 22-year-old, out of college guy was, learning second base. I only played shortstop my whole career, all the way through college. So that wasn't going to be in the cards in pro ball. I just wasn't an immediate minor league shortstop. Plain and simple. So I had to play second. I had to learn how to play third. That occasional off day in the outfield, for their next prospect outfielder was, I had to go learn how to play left and right field pretty much on the fly. So yeah, you could say that was kind of like, doing whatever it took to have the team win, but it was also, for me personally, just trying to keep a job. If I got on the field, that's the only way I was able to produce and open up some eyes to these coordinators. So I just had to do whatever I could to get on the field. It was like, hey, is anybody pull that field? So, I was going to be the first one to raise my hand just in order to get on the field.
There's something said about staying athletic as much as you can too, right? Like I remember talking to Jim Penders at UConn. He's like, we recruit up the middle. We recruit shortstop, center fielders, pitchers, and catchers. Because if you get an athletic catcher, you can put him at second, a la Craig Biggio or something like that. Kiner Falefa, those guys can do it. Shortstops you can put anywhere, center fielders you can kind of put anywhere. So there's something to be said for it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, 100% spot on. I think that helped me out as far as quickly kind of molding into those different positions. I don't know if I necessarily would have if I didn't play shortstop for such a long time growing up. So yeah, really good point.
And to build on that, like defensive versatility it's awesome for your resume. In the big leagues, you played, basically 8 positions, right? You've gone everywhere, including pitcher, catcher. How did you wind up catching? I don't remember you ever telling me that story.
Yeah, it was they sent me to Instructs after my first full season. So after 2017, I finished that season in low A. I think I got a month in high A at the end of the year, but I think that was the first year where they were like, we might have something in this guy. I put up really good numbers. And that was, like I said, the first year where I might have caught some attention. So, in the Rays typical fashion, they like to explore some options, which to their credit, I don't necessarily know if I would have made it to the big leagues the way I did if I wasn't in the Rays organization with their, kind of free thinking and, moving guys around. And I think in a way that kind of helped me advance pretty quickly, honestly. But to that point, they're always looking for that next athletic catcher where they can kind of just move the roster around. So they sent me to instructs that year. I got absolutely annihilated. It didn't work out. It was just it was one of those things where I just didn't have the foundation, and it showed really quick. And yeah, and I think the next year, one of our catchers got tossed actually, and I got like 6 pitches behind the plate in Double A.
There you go.
Off on the 7th. So yeah, so I got a little bit of catching experience. I think I'm still categorized as the emergency third catcher, I think, at even Milwaukee now. So fingers crossed we never get to that point in the game. But if we do, I guess I'll have a little bit of yeah, I'll be a little ready. Yeah.
Well, that said, even if we're excluding pitching and catching, the prep that goes there, you played shortstop, second, third, first, in both corner outfields. How challenging is it to rotate from position to position in the same game, and over multiple seasons? Like, do you have specific preparation strategies that you employ to make sure you're ready to answer every bell potentially in the same game?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's not easy. This year, obviously, I haven't done as much outfield work as I did with Tampa, but even the difference between playing up the middle, shortstop, second base compared to corner infielders, where it's more lateral compared to up the middle, you kind of make your own direction. It's definitely a lot of first step agility work. I think that kind of just plays really in any position that you play on the field. So a lot of it, is ladder drills and just first step quickness. I think to boil it down to one thing that I focus on to kind of get me ready for every position would be that, and just a lot of handwork too.
You basically drill the position that you find yourself playing the most in that moment. But if you're at third for a week at a time to fill in for someone who's banged up, will you still go take ground balls at second or go to first and stuff too?
I think, yeah, I definitely still do. If I'm locked into at third base for a week or two, like you mentioned, there'll be a day where I'll take ground balls at shortstop just to switch it up, get the body feeling a little bit different. Not so much lateral, like side to side at third base. Like I said, kind of create your own angles at shortstop. It's just good for the body to mix it up that way, not get stagnant.
Maybe building on that, you've been on teams where you're an everyday player, and then on teams where you played, once or twice a week. How do you structure your day, your approach, to stay fresh at the plate when you aren't necessarily getting as many at bats as you would have in years past when you're regular?
Just staying fresh, really. It's kind of the biggest thing for me has always been being on time for the fastball. So, whether the playing time is dwindling or it's kind of a more routine, everyday type thing, as long as I feel like I'm on time for that fastball, I can always react to off speed. And is my body in a good position to attack the heater, then, I'll be able to stay there for the off speed.
So you need to see velo regularly on machines and all that.
Oh yeah. I see a lot of arm. And then if I feel like something is off, I will do machine more so for, I think, drills. So I do, like what you mentioned, I do a lot of right-handed sliders if I feel like I'm pulling off my front shoulder a lot on the heater. So more so, I like to see live arm, a really good BP thrower that, has different pitches in their arsenal where it's not just fastball.
Random practice works.
Yeah, exactly. I treat batting practice as like not a feel good round where it's, there's a lot of 5 o'clock hitters these days. There's a lot of, just feel good.
Yeah.
That's not really preparing you for the game, I think. Not saying I'm trying to get like sawed off in BP, but I'm definitely trying to compete against that BP thrower. And that, I think, just the word competing against the guy kind of just mentally puts you in a good slate for that 7 o'clock game.
I love that. And it's getting more and more common, becoming more accepted. Obviously, Giants popularized it a lot. Some of the stuff they did last year. So, all right. We always go lightning round in the end. What hitters do you like to watch and why?
He actually kind of answered it earlier, honestly. I'm lucky enough to be around some really good guys at your facility in the offseason. And my favorite is Trey Turner. I like Arenado. I love Goldschmidt's swing. His body's just so much different than mine that it's kind of hard to take his mechanics and put it into mine. Obviously, he's having a stupid, really good year. And then another one I like to watch, which I think is kind of slept on, is Wilmer Flores. I think his swing is very compact, very fundamentally sound. I got a chance to see it live this year. We played the Giants for the first time in my career. And yeah, yeah, I think he's a true professional too.
Okay.
So
You just got a new contract today too. You earned it.
oh, did he? I didn't see that.
Yeah. Just came out this morning.
Okay.
All right, give teenage Mike Brousseau some advice. You can go back in time.
Teenage Mike Brosseau, I would say watch as much as possible. I was really fortunate growing up to be around some really good players and just like be around big league players a lot, going to the Cubs games and getting close access to that. And I never fully, watched them enough. I was just too starstruck. And I think if I grew up trying to see what they were doing a little bit closer, I could have had that, extra motivation or knowledge, I guess, at a younger age. So a lot of watching, I would tell my younger self.
I think that's good advice for everybody. Watch the game and get to understand it a lot better.
So much to learn when you just watch it, man. So much.
Kills me when I watch games and people are just staring at their cell phone the whole time. Yeah. There's so much happening the game within the game. Yeah. What's something you think every young baseball player should read or watch? What's a resource that made a difference for you?
Yeah, big one. Kind of going back to my hitting guy Benny was The Science of Hitting by Ted Williams. That reading that book, super short, very informative. Takes 45 minutes to read cover to cover, but you can just dive into that book for hours and hours if you really wanted to. That helped me really, I think, understand my swing a lot more, knowing why things happen, why I want to get in certain spots in a swing. That changed my whole mentality on hitting completely.
Timeless.
100%. That book will never die.
We talked last one for you. We talked about some of the players you've been around and how they've helped you. You talked about a hitting coach that's been really impactful for you this past off season. So you've interacted with a lot of coaches across multiple organizations in the private sector, in college. We have a lot of coaches that listen to this and want to do right by their athletes. What are some of the qualities that you think are the most impactful for you with the coaches that have helped you the most?
I think the biggest one that stands out is the best coaches I've had are the best listeners. I think they truly get to know you on a personal level, and what clicks for you, instead of having a cookie cutter way of portraying what they want to portray to their guys, which is not necessarily a bad thing. Every coach has to have their roots and their, what makes them, right? But at the same time, if it doesn't work for the player, then I think fighting different ways of instructing can kind of be detrimental. But like I said, listening, kind of knowing what works for each individual, what works for me was a huge thing that, Benny and you, I think you're one of the best listeners I've come across from a teaching standpoint. It's just, it makes things so much more, easy to work with. It's that personal relationship that makes a good coach, I think.
It's gotta be a collaboration between the coach and the athlete, right? You want to be invested in, whatever's pulled together, and then you'll be more adherent to it if you feel like you've had a say in the process. That's 100%. Huge. I love it. Well, my man, you got a good social media. It's Mike Brosseau on Instagram, and it's your name with the number 10 on the end on Twitter. Appreciate you so much taking the time. Good to catch up, and hopefully see you again very soon.
Absolutely. Always a pleasure, my man.
All right. We'll talk to you soon, bud.
Sounds good.